It's March 99, UConn-Duke, national title. This is Remember That Game, the podcast about sporting events that take you on a journey and maybe start the path of the zeitgeist. I'm your host, Thomas Emerick, and my guest is Representative Joe Courtney of Connecticut's 2nd District, including Storrs and UConn Huskies basketball. The men's side reaches their first Final Four here after the program went through quite the evolution at the turn of the 90s. Right as you started out nearby in the state legislature, what was the early Calhoun era like as a fan in that area east of Hartford?
Sure. So first of all, thank you for the invitation. And so having grown up in Connecticut, lived there my whole life. My family goes back actually 3 generations. UConn basketball was always something that really brought the state together. We had one brief shining moment with a professional sport team, the Hartford Whalers, but that's been pretty much it. So UConn men's basketball, which pre-Calhoun, was still very popular. My law firm where I was working back in those days, we had season tickets, so I used to go to all the games, women too. And but anyway, Calhoun showed up. It really was a really pivotal moment for the program because by then UConn was in the Big East, but was always kind of the second tier level in the conference that was there. We had some great players, but Jim just brought an intensity that really changed the program and really boosted recruitment. We won the NIT in 1989, which at the time was sort of considered a little bit kind of a consolation prize, but still it kind of really I was there when that happened, and it was really actually kind of a big vibe change in terms of the fans and everybody else. Came close during the 90s. Ray Allen was part of that era. Some amazing games with him and Allen Iverson at Georgetown. The winning basket that Ray Allen hit at the Big East Finals there was, I think, one of the really iconic sort of NCAA basketball sort of video clips there. But Tate George, same thing. But finally in '99, we sort of got over the hump. And because of the fact that our firm had those season tickets, I was able to get tickets for the Final Four. Went down to Tampa where it was, and it was just an amazing moment to sort of be part of a great program's history.
Yeah, and we'll go to tip off in St. Petersburg, Florida for the 99 final at the Tampa Bay Rays new park there. Yeah, Tropicana Field.
Yeah.
And periodically transport back to UConn's road here, interweaving with key moments from this game. Duke, #1 overall seed at the ASCC. UConn out the Big East, also 1 seed, but kicked out west by the Blue Devils, who were granted the East region there. They skated by a 30-point average margin. More bumpy for Connecticut out in the West region, down to the final seconds in the regional final against the original Gonzaga Cinderella team. Then get past the Buckeyes on Saturday. What were your expectations like coming in here championship night?
So, again, the narrative and the background noise, sports pundits, was that Duke was an overwhelming favorite. I mean, as you know, at the Final Four, the first game's played on Saturday, and then you got all this waiting time until Monday night for the final. So, people are doing different stuff. A buddy of mine and I went to actually the Yankees spring training facility there and watched the spring training game there, surrounded by Duke fans in the crowd there, who were all really, they saw our UConn caps and razzing us, and very cocky and super confident. And but Khalid El-Amin was this incredible just driving spirit on that team. The point guard who was interviewed right before the game, you may recall, where he said, "We're going to shock the world." And you could even see the sports announcers kind of doing an eye roll when he said that. But again, it was I would be not truthful if I said that I was totally confident. that they were going to pull it off. They fell behind at the beginning of the game there, and it was 7-2. I can still remember that, and I was just like, oh God, we're digging a hole here. But again, Khalid, Jake Boskel, Ricky Moore, he was on Trajan Landon, on Duke, and really bottled him up there. So, typical fashion, it was a real Calhoun tough defensive sort of strategy in terms of where I think they, again, kind of hung in there until they pulled it off at the end.
Yeah, and as Jake Voskuhl and Elton Brand met at midcourt at the start, Jim Nantz says, what began as the most turbulent and tumultuous first 2 rounds ever has the 2 teams everyone wanted in the title game. You mentioned, they're razzing you down in Tampa Bay. Was this the game you wanted to see, given their history against Duke, the Leitner buzzer beater in 90 and getting knocked out again in 91?
No, absolutely. I mean, it's been a great rivalry. Krzyzewski and Calhoun, 2 of the giants in college basketball, Hall of Fame coaches. And there was just no question that Duke, was and still is, one of the iconic blue blood teams in the NCAA. UConn was at that point really just sort of aspirational as far as that was concerned. So, to really, break through that, sort of ceiling for UConn going up against Duke was just really the ultimate test. And the intensity of the crowd, that was in there, huge UConn contingent, flew down from Connecticut and drove down, and obviously Duke, being closer, had a great presence there as well. So sometimes the NCAAs aren't as quite as intense as regular season games where you've got, the real diehard, local fans that are there, but there was really sizable crowds there for both sides. So, I mean, I was at midcourt on the second tier of the Tropicana Dome and looking down on it, and it was, you just sort of felt this tingling, in your, skin and your back, your backs, as the game started. And it was for someone, again, who had been a longtime season ticket holder, left a lot of games where we came up short, particularly in the Big East against, Boeheim, Syracuse, and Pitt, and Georgetown. I had definitely experienced that sort of Red Sox fan sort of crushing defeats, and was hoping that, I wasn't going to have to sort of cope with that emotionally one more time.
Oh yeah, it had to be nerve-wracking, especially on the doorstep of the Final Four earlier in the decade, and then you finally break through, and you have Duke 9.5-point favorites here for an implied win probability of 84%. You mentioned you go down early, but Ricky Moore stabilizes you guys offensively, and he's going to be huge later defensively. The Duke and UConn crowds both bringing it. UConn crowd cutting its teeth in the Big East, and the Madison Square Garden Big East tournament every year. You mentioned Ray Allen and Chris Iverson in '96 does ridiculous ratings there. UConn, Georgetown, and due to the long-running partnership with the conference, it's on ESPN. Shout out to Marine Engineers down Mystic. Did it seem like a rising tide lifts all boats situation with the popularity of college basketball for ESPN, UConn, the Big East, and the state of Connecticut?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, the Big East obviously has sort of come back to Connecticut, which for some of us, longtime fans, was really great news. And again, I think it's still super good basketball. Obviously, having St. John's now really returning as a real force is going to be great for next year. Having said that, the prior era, which was really epic with, John Thompson at Georgetown, and just great, players that went on to the NBA from there. Boeheim, Louis, and St. John's that were there. I mean, it was really just an incredible time. So, I was in New York for the Big East tournament it was the Big East tournament in 1989. I had actually just proposed to my wife, and we had spent the day in New York City. She was working as a nurse at Bellevue Hospital at the time, and bought her a ring, in the jewelry section of, New York City that was there. And then we scalped tickets, to watch Syracuse, UConn that night afterwards. So it's kind of a somewhat different way to celebrate, an engagement. But my wife's a big fan, and she was thrilled to be there too.
Yeah, I mean, it was the show in the 80s and still a great conference in the 90s. ACC also very good in the 90s, and we get Big East and ACC facing off to cap the 90s. UConn got here beating Ohio State in the semifinals. Uh, Ricky Moore, huge on defense there again on Michael Redd, put the glove on. And that team was coached by Jim O'Brien, a UConn assistant prior to Calhoun. O'Brien said that he never could have envisioned UConn would get where they are. Calhoun said that back then he'd tell recruits, guess who you'll play against? And now it's, hey, guess who you'll play with. This game, thrilling on both counts, tenacious defense on Elton Brand, throwing weak side doubles, Langdon keeping Duke in striking distance, a 4-point play gets them ahead right before the half, 39-37 at halftime. You mentioned the nerves, seeing how you hung in, but how quick Duke could strike back. Did it change the mindset at halftime? Is it more nerves, fewer nerves, or about the same?
No, it was more. It was actually more nerves, because actually the excitement was that we were in it. That it was not going to be a blowout. That the predictions really were not sort of playing out. And Ricky Moore, who did have a short stint in the NBA after he left, but I'll tell you, I sometimes think in terms of the Hall of Fame of UConn players over the years, he's sometimes really overlooked. And I'll tell you, without him, I don't think they would have won that game. And he, like you said, his defense was just unbelievable. And, he made the shots, tough shots when he had to. But again, as the second half started, it really seemed like, it wasn't like UConn was just going to run out of gas, and that they really kept it, surprisingly, I think for a lot of people, really tight there till the end. And I think the experience of playing in really, deeply, hotly contested games in the Big East that always, a lot of them were buzzer beaters and came down to the end, I kind of gave them the mental toughness and Calhoun the game experience, to have them ready, to really finish it off. But the Leitner killer, shot was when it didn't go our way. And honestly, I think Krzyzewski, if you watch that play where Leitner, hit a buzzer beater there, it was actually Krzyzewski. He drew up just the perfect play. Leitner was just wide open for that jump shot. And, it was a 2-pointer. It wasn't some, bomb from, way down deep or anything like that, but it was just a really well drawn up play. So, obviously in that sense, you had two great game coaches, in a close game. So, definitely, like I said, one of the games of all time.
Yeah, Coach K, in 90 draws up a good shot for the inbound, man. And Leitner, he has a few of those right at the buzzer. And in 99, the Huskies will need to hit a few of their own shots late, especially from El-Amin, who had struggled but came up big late against Gonzaga. Was 0 for 12 from the field, but hit 2 huge free throws at the end and got in foul trouble in the first half here in the final. But they'll need him to bounce back again, and he will. He and Hamilton seem to have a sense for how to play off each other and pick each other up. And we'll see that in the second half, whether it's Hamilton catching off a double screen or El-Amin using the motion with Hamilton to pick his spots, get a floater or a leaner. What was it like watching this legendary duo of the late 90s, Rip and El-Amin?
So, El-Amin's mental toughness was just incredible. That was the thing about him. As you point out, he would go through a really, terrible dry spell of shooting, but it didn't slow, it didn't affect him. He didn't sort of pull back or shy away from taking a shot. And so, yeah, it was no surprise that he made those free throws at the end of that game, because he still kind of had nerves of steel. And Hamilton, who obviously went on to have a great NBA career, again, just great pure shooter. Really long in terms of his ability to get up for rebounds, and great, smarts in terms of just how to play in Calhoun's system that definitely is demanding. It was though they were the heart of the team in terms of certainly the scoring and the leadership on the team. Ricky Moore was kind of a quiet, solid contributor, but as I said earlier, I mean, he just made such a big difference.
Yeah, those two huge offensively, but then Ricky Moore, they don't win the title without him and what he brings. Those 13 points early, stabilize them. The second half, the chess match between Coach K and Calhoun continues. They got more chasing Trajan Langdon around after Langdon was splashing threes all during the first half. But Coach K adjusts as well. They Calhoun did a good job boxing up Elton Brand with the forwards and the help. But second half, Langdon is driving and finding Elton Brand before the double arrives. Carrawell driving dish to Battier to put Duke up 49-45. Elton Brand, the National Player of the Year. So, it's a Duke team that has a lot of accolades there coming in, rightly so. On the women's side of the finals, they also have an All-American big with Michelle Van Gorp. UConn women's lost early as a 1 seed, but would win it all the following year. And they now have 12 titles. Dick Vitale ends up calling it the basketball capital of the world. How did this simultaneous emergence of these two teams really generate the energy for the programs in Storrs, Connecticut?
Yeah, I mean, Gino Auriemma and the women's team is just another really amazing basketball story. When he first started, and even with the Rebecca Lobo period there, the attendance was still could be pretty thin at some of the games there, but the local public TV outlet started to broadcast all the games. And it was like their best selling, programming that they had by far. And, with the cuts to public TV lately, they probably wish they had those games back but it also, I mean, it spread the popularity of the team all across the state. So, now obviously, and I mean, for quite a while now, actually, that's been sellout crowds. And, there was some sort of a little bit of sort of chippiness sometimes between some fans who consider themselves women's basketball fans and men's basketball fans. As I said, the firm I worked for, we had tickets for both, and we'd go to all the games, and it was get you through the winter, to head up to Storrs and Gamble, which was basically built in the Jim Calhoun era. Before that, they had a really little bandbox facility there on the Storrs campus. So, and at this point, I think, real fans, are just celebrate both teams and really, love driving on Interstate 84 and seeing the off ramp for UConn, where they've got listed again all of the national championships that both programs have achieved. That's there. So yeah, Gino, a lot of people were sort of speculating about whether or not he'd had enough and he was going to step down, but he's really gotten a second wind, and the program's still doing terrific. And obviously, the recruitment just is a machine there in terms of what he's able to bring in terms of the best players and high school players across the country.
Rip Hamilton really heats up in the second half, scoring a game high 27. Every time he loses his man off a baseline screen and gets the ball, the mid-range game, as pure as it gets. Duke's best defender, Carrawell, gets so desperate that he accidentally runs into Hamilton after fighting through the screen. Hamilton hits two from the line to make it 70-68 with under 4 minutes, making it 13 combined ties and lead changes in this thriller. Where were you watching this one, and how are people around you reacting as Hamilton kept answering?
I mean, it really was. So but at that point in the game, everybody was standing. And as I said, we had sort of mid-court seats in the second level looking straight down. So you had really, this great unobstructed view. And yeah, I mean, it was like, the heavyweight fighter where they were just, you know, landing punches one after another with, just great offensive plays, which, again, the swings of emotion was just going back and forth. And I mean, you could really, the crowd was, and I've been to a lot of games, given the fact that it was a national championship and it was so close and it was just seesawing back and forth. I mean, I think it just made it, even more intense and special.
Yeah, and the Huskies would get all 11 players out on the court in the championship as they throw the kitchen sink defensively at Duke, who again does manage to get stronger in the second half. Despite their short rotation, Duke only got shots out of one bench player in this one, Corey Maggette, and William Avery will go 13th and 14th in the 98-9 draft. Elton Brand first overall. Future player of the year, Shane Battier with timely rebounds and help defense. But of course, Rip Hamilton does go pretty high in this draft as well. But UConn stays resilient and adaptable to hang in with guys like Kevin Freeman, who
Yep.
averaged double figures, but is not forcing his offense here, is instead leading the team in blocks and offensive rebounds so that they can ride the hot hand of Rip, who narrowly avoids a steal by the number one pick, Brand. And Kansas Trey puts UConn up 5, 73-68, 3.5 left now. Center Suleiman Wan gave them 8 minutes, and he's losing it after that shot on the sideline, knees and face on the ground. UConn fans in the stands, hearts in their stomachs, right there with them. What are some of your favorite parts about representing Storrs, Connecticut, and the central to eastern portion of the state in U.S. Congress since first elected there a few years later in 2006?
Yeah, so I mean, it's a great part of Connecticut. We don't have any large cities in the second district. It's a lot of sort of suburban and rural towns that are there. And Storrs was an ag school when it was founded, back in the 1800s there. And so I was reading an interview with Ray Allen recently where he was talking about how playing at UConn he thought was really so important compared to other schools because there's not many distractions there. I mean, if you really, want to get serious and hone your game, he said that, that was sort of the perfect place for him, to just really concentrate as much as he possibly can. But having said that, I mean, there's, if you go along the shoreline of Eastern Connecticut, you've got these, great communities like Old Saybrook where Katharine Hepburn lived, and Mystic, Connecticut, which is, just one of the most, picturesque New England kind of, seacoast towns that are there. New London, Groton. We have the electric boat shipyard where we build nuclear powered submarines. I got a workforce of 24,000 and growing. And, it's a pretty amazing facility that's there. UConn supplies a lot of the engineers, that go into the design and engineering work behind all that. And, but there's no question that Storrs is one of the pillars of the district. And again, I went to the law school. I went to UConn Law School, so I'm a Husky grad in that sense. And it's a very unifying sort of alumnus in terms of people who are you if you go to UConn, you're UConn forever. And during basketball season, it's obviously a very unifying thing in the state. The victory parades in Hartford are just amazing in terms of how many people are concentrated into downtown. As I said, since the Whalers left, I just feel like there's just like this sort of completely concentrated attention on both programs that really everybody talks about it, during the week, during the season, it's just, a constant topic of conversation that complete strangers can sort of strike up conversations and connect with. So it's a very, we're a small state, but as I said, it's pretty special to have that program, those two programs there that, as I said, even now finally, the Dick Vitales and some of the skeptics in the sports media are finally recognizing that, is truly a blue blood program.
Yeah, I mean, just in time there at 97, the Hartford Whalers, as you mentioned, and they have a great baseball cap. I still see people sporting
Yep.
around sometimes. They go down to Raleigh in 97, and then UConn starts to become a powerhouse. And here at the end of the game in 99, we got lifetime Husky Ray Allen in the house as well at Tropicana, watching Rip do a pretty solid impression. Mike Krzyzewski just has his guys avoid the double screen in the baseline, just meet Rip on the other side, and Duke's defense goes all out to deny Hamilton, and that helps. It cuts it down to 73-72, closing in on 1 minute left. And this is where El-Amin finds his spots. Struggled that day, but uses the guy chasing Hamilton as a screen on Battier, gets a space for the leaner, pushes it to 75-72 when Hamilton clears the baseline, just as El-Amin finds his spot for the floater, beats Brand off the bounce, and that gets it to 75-72. Two players that bring something different with Hamilton and El-Amin working together. People from different walks of life together in Gamble Pavilion on that feed there. They're showing on the broadcast. People with different perspectives, high-fiving at the bars across Connecticut on a Monday night. Before you began serving in Congress, you won an award for bipartisanship in the Connecticut state legislature. Do you think common sports fandom can be a depolarizer?
Oh, absolutely. When I was in the General Assembly, they had a poll and I was voted Democrat most admired by Republicans. And, some of that is because you worked on legislation together and that sort of thing. But there's no question that, having the ability to connect with people who just, don't have the same political points of view, I think really helps sort of lubricate, the legislative process in a very healthy way. And since coming to Congress, I mean, that's also, I've got some, Republican friends who are from Kentucky, and we sort of talk, trash in a friendly way about basketball with those guys. There's the Congressional baseball game, which I don't play in anymore or never really did because by the time I got to Congress, I wasn't too interested in doing hook slides, into second base or anything like that. But there is also the Congressional Ryder Cup, which is Democrat versus Republican. I'm actually the captain of the Democratic team. I'm an 11 handicap. So, we're able to, but honestly, it's an opportunity to, get out on a golf course for, 4 or 5 hours with people that you really, you don't get to spend much time with because, they caucus in different rooms and, it's polarized. I'm not going to, try and sort of, change anyone's perception. It's pretty tough down here, but sports really is, I think something that really can create, a bridge for people to really talk about something other than the latest Twitter feed, 24-hour news cycle, cable show competition about who can be more outrageous kind of thing. So I think that's something that people can really get away from sort of the negativity and really talk and focus and share sort of just personal interaction on something that actually kind of humanizes the place and I think that's really important.
Yeah, and a couple players in this game that had a relationship off the court, William Avery and Ricky Moore. Avery cuts it to 75-74. High school teammates in Augusta, Georgia, as Jim Nantz made note of multiple times on the broadcast. But Calhoun has Ricky Moore seed his offensive game again, chases Trajan Langdon everywhere in the second half, and here it gets down in the final 10 seconds, 1-point game, Langdon driving, Moore taking away the lane, travel.
Yep.
El-Amin again, like against Gonzaga, 2 free throws to push it to 3 points. And so there's going to be no cross court to Leighton area at the elbow. It's UConn swarming Langdon out past the 3-point line. The second time down, steal as time expires. What was the environment like on the streets that night and in the following weeks?
So obviously the UConn fans were in a frenzy, afterwards because it was almost like a religious experience to actually win a national championship for a lot of people who were, been lifelong diehard fans. I mean, the closest thing I can compare it to is the 2004 Red Sox, when they finally won the World Series. Out in the parking lot area, where people are getting in line to get on buses to go back to their hotels or whatever. I mean, obviously, you could tell where the Duke contingent was because, I mean, they were honestly in a state of shock. I mean, you could just see they were just stunned because, as you said, the point spread before the game, all the chatter about, what a great team they had. And again, so many players that went on to the NBA and had really solid careers. Understandable, but having said that, I mean, that's the wonderful thing about the NCAA tournament, and also the really frightening thing about it is just that one game can just end your dream, and it can go either way. But for obviously at the airport the next day when people were flying home to Connecticut, the party was still going on strong. I mean, people were out all night, celebrating there in Tampa. And it was still have friends that we, stay in touch with who are there as part of that contingent. And, we still talk about it to this day.
Yeah, this is a massive upset, and Jim Nance and Billy Packer on the broadcast. Rest in peace, Billy Packer. Do a great job of highlighting the pressure and the beauty of the moment. And they mentioned, hey, a lot of people view this as the Duke Invitational. Well, UConn goes and gets their first men's basketball title, and they'll get 5 more and counting here in the 21st century. Was the reaction on the men's side and the women's side that they're at 12 total now, including 10 or 11 since 2000? Was the reaction to any of them like this one here in '99, or what were the recent ones like in that celebration?
So, there's no question the first one is always really special. And it was true for the UConn women, Jen Rosati and Rebecca Lobo. I mean, remember Rosati was on the cover of Sports Illustrated, that, amazing year when that happened. I think for the men, we've had sort of these gaps, where there's been some years where things, were pretty disappointing. That's there. And I will say, the 2 titles since Danny Hurley arrived, you could sort of feel, this surge of excitement because, there was a lot of talk that, once Calhoun left, there's just, no way you're going to replicate, that kind of, winning record or winning attitude that's there. And so, I think, a lot of that has come back, certainly for the men. And, with Gino, I mean, he also kind of hit a stretch there where, they obviously made it in some instances the Final Four or, Sweet 16. But, for the women's program, if he didn't win the title, that was kind of considered sort of an off year that was there. So he had gone through quite a little bit of a stretch there. But, having Paige healthy last year in AZ Fudd, I think, it was a special year for them to win this. And I know it was special for him. I mean, he was very emotional about it. So we're lucky to have him, still in the arena, back ready to coach again this coming year. And again, there was such a basic foundation of really, huge support for both programs that's there that, they're always going to be, I think, considered, kind of the 6th man for both programs in terms of the crowd. The games at Gamble, the games in Hartford, once that crowd gets going, it's pretty wild, and it's a big uplift.
Yeah, and the emotion of getting back there, it seems like it's a whole totally different thing. These great teams have a little, or programs have a hiatus, but then they get back. It seems like it's something a little different.
Yep.
And 2014, one of those years you got back there, post Calhoun, and you mentioned your friend in Kentucky. I read that he gave you Kentucky bourbon after
Yeah.
Shabazz Napier, and the Huskies prevailed against the slight dogs against the Wildcats. Um, since UConn, I imagine they typically put you on the collecting end. Does that bottle for Title IV stand out as the best from these friendly wagers, or have reps from other districts come up with some
Actually,
pretty good ones?
get that baseball. Actually, I also got a Louisville Slugger with my name,
Very nice.
emblazoned on it there. So actually, it's right here.
Oh, very nice. Kentucky, man.
So yeah.
Come up with
So
the good stuff.
but I've also been on the losing end and have gotten some Mystic Pizza delivered from Connecticut, as well as we've got obviously some great craft breweries there. So some local craft brews, and you usually get some paraphernalia. Sometimes you have to wear the other side's sweatshirt or something, as for a floor boat series, just as a part of the wager. So which again, to your point, I mean, it's actually kind of another example of where, this place you can sort of talk about something else and actually enjoy each other.
Yeah, and yeah, so critical. And do you have time for two more questions?
Sure.
Cool. And are there any friendly intrastate rivalries that people really care about in Connecticut? UConn Yale seems like it had salience as a football thing long ago, primarily. Did you lose a friendly wager to colleagues down southwest in New Haven when Yale upset UConn men's basketball in 2014, or was that early season tune-up and cross-congressional border rivalry big enough of a deal there between Eastern Connecticut and New Haven?
So it's not really close the same. And your point is that's usually an early season game that's there. Congresswoman DeLauro represents New Haven, and she obviously does great work in terms of protecting Yale's funding levels and for research and development at the medical center there, but generally speaking, the whole delegation kind of it's pretty much go Huskies, in terms of, where they're coming from. So Congressman Larson went to Central Connecticut, and actually one of Calhoun's former assistant coaches, Howie Dickerman, coached at Central Connecticut for a while there. And actually they had some pretty good years and made it to some, I think one year they made it to the big dance in their division, but that's about it, in terms of intra-state rivalry.
Yeah, and since the 90s, it's go Huskies. 12 titles on the women's side, 6 on the men's side. And how important were 99 and 2000 in laying the foundation for the 21st century in Connecticut for both state pride and the two basketball programs with the most titles over the past few decades?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's winning that title, just you could really feel like the whole sort of feeling of the fan base transformed. That we really could hold our heads up as champions, and that was always kind of the I think for longtime fans, it just seemed like we were always just kind of competitive, but always kind of came up short, in the big games, and it was always the other programs, that really got that status that was there. So I think it was definitely a breakthrough moment, and then the subsequent titles under Calhoun, again, huge support. Everybody's eyes were glued to the TV sets, during the tournaments that was there, but there was sort of almost a different kind of confidence level that people had, because we've done this already, we can do it again, kind of thing, as opposed to that first title when it was just like, are we gonna have our hearts broken again? So I'm still friends with Jim Calhoun. I play golf with him usually once every summer. They still have an office for him at the Storrs facility there at Gamble. Hurley has had him come in and give like sort of pep talks, to the team that was there, which he's very good at. He's still got that intense, Boston Irish sort of, delivery in terms of his speeches and comments that are there. And, he's obviously got a lifetime of basketball stories that are just unbelievable, in terms of, even Len Bias story, who he coached at Northeastern, one of the great tragedies there when, he died before he could really show what he could do in the NBA kind of thing. So, yeah, Jim is still, I think just a god, in the state of Connecticut in terms of just, when he's out in public, that's there. And as I said, Gino, obviously in the women's program is somebody that, he's revered, in the state. And so we all feel very lucky,